My name is Harper, and am 22 years old. I stood outside the graduation hall in my cap and gown, staring at my phone with 17 unanswered calls to my parents. Inside, families were cheering and taking photos while I watched two empty seats in the third row where my mom and dad were supposed to be sitting. When my phone finally buzzed, it wasn't a call but a text from my mother that read, "Something came up. Well, celebrate later." I forced a smile through the ceremony, but I had no idea that my college degree would become their weapon against me just 3 weeks later. Before we dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and if you're ready to hear how my own parents turned my biggest achievement into their personal ATM, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, because this story gets darker than you can imagine. Let's get into it. I need you to understand what that degree meant to me because context matters here. I was the first person in my entire family to graduate from college. Not just my immediate family, but my extended family too. My parents, Maureen and Leonard, always talked about how proud they were when I got accepted to the University of Massachusetts, but pride and support are two very different things. I worked 2 jobs through all 4 years of school. I had a partial scholarship that covered tuition, but everything else like rent, food, books, and basic survival came out of my own pocket. I waitressed at a local diner on weekends, pulling double shifts that left my feet swollen and my back aching, and I worked at the campus library during weeknights, shelving books until my eyes blurred from exhaustion. I'm not saying this for sympathy, but so you understand that I earned every single credit hour of that degree. My parents lived in Ohio, about 10 hours away by car. They had been planning to come to my graduation for months. My mother called me every other week leading up to the ceremony, asking about hotel recommendations and what she should wear. My father even bought plane tickets in March, 3 months early, because he said he wanted to make sure they got good prices. I reserved 2 seats right in the middle section where they'd have a perfect view of the stage. I even bought them a corsage and boutonniere from the campus flower shop because I wanted everything to be perfect. This was supposed to be our family's big moment, the culmination of years of sacrifice and hard work. The morning of graduation, I woke up at 6 in the morning with excitement buzzing through my entire body. I called my parents to confirm their flight details, but neither of them answered. I figured they were probably already on the plane or dealing with airport security, so I sent a cheerful text telling them I couldn't wait to see them. I got ready slowly, savoring every moment, pressing my gown carefully and adjusting my cap about 100 times in the mirror. My roommate Isabel helped me curl my hair and told me I looked beautiful. She kept checking her phone for updates from her own family who were driving in from Connecticut. By the time we arrived at the graduation venue, my stomach was twisted in knots. I kept scanning the crowd for my parents' faces, but I didn't see them anywhere. I checked my phone obsessively, but there were no new messages. The ceremony started at 10 in the morning sharp, and as I walked into the hall with my graduating class, I kept turning my head to look at those 2 empty seats. I watched Isabel's parents wave at her with huge smiles, holding up a banner with her name on it. I saw other families taking pictures and crying happy tears. I felt like I was watching everyone else's joy through a thick pane of glass. When they called my name and I walked across that stage to receive my diploma, I heard some scattered applause from classmates I barely knew, but there was no one screaming my name or standing up to cheer. The photographer asked me to smile, and I did, but it felt like my face was made of plastic. I shook the dean's hand, accepted my diploma cover, and walked off the stage feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my entire life. After the ceremony ended, I stood outside the hall while everyone else took family photos. I finally got through to my parents an hour later. My mother's voice sounded distracted and thin when she answered. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry," she said. But there was no emotion in her words. "Your father had a work thing come up at the last minute. We just couldn't make it." You understand, right? I didn't understand. I didn't understand at all. I asked her what kind of work emergency happens on a Sunday morning that's important enough to miss your daughter's college graduation. She got defensive immediately, her voice going sharp. "Harper, don't be dramatic. Well, celebrate later. It's just a ceremony. You still got your degree, didn't you?" I tried to talk to my father, but he barely said 3 sentences to me. His voice was irritated, almost angry, like I was inconveniencing him by being upset. "Your mother explained it," he said flatly. "Well, make it up to you. Stop making this a big deal." Then he hung up on me. Just ended the call while I was mid-sentence. I stood there holding my phone, tears running down my face and ruining the makeup Isabel had helped me apply that morning. She found me in the bathroom 20 minutes later, sitting on the floor in my gown, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. Isabel's family invited me to their celebration dinner at a nice Italian restaurant near campus. They were kind and warm, and they toasted to my accomplishments, but the entire time I felt this crushing sense of humiliation. I kept thinking about how my parents promised they'd be there. They promised. And then they just didn't show up and acted like I was being unreasonable for caring. That night, lying in my dorm bed for the last time, I tried to convince myself that maybe there really was an emergency. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But deep in my gut, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know how wrong yet. I moved to Boston a week after graduation. I had accepted an entry-level position at a small marketing firm that paid $42,000 a year, which felt like a fortune after 4 years of scraping by on minimum wage. The salary was barely enough to cover rent in Boston, where even studio apartments cost over $1,500 a month, plus I had student loan payments starting in 6 months. But I was optimistic. I had my degree, I had a real job, and I was finally starting my adult life. I rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment in Allston, a neighborhood known for being affordable by Boston standards, which meant it was still expensive, but at least I wasn't living with 3 roommates anymore. 3 days into my new job, I received a phone call from a bank I had never heard of. The woman on the phone introduced herself as a representative from Midwest Financial Solutions and asked me about the status of my loan application. I was confused. I told her I hadn't applied for any loan. There was a pause on her end, and then she said that according to their records, someone had submitted an application in my name 2 weeks ago using my social security number and personal information. My heart started pounding. I asked her for more details, but she said she couldn't share specific information over the phone without verifying my identity, which I obviously couldn't do since I hadn't applied for anything. I hung up and immediately assumed this was identity theft. I had heard stories about people getting their information stolen online or through data breaches. I changed all my passwords that night and filed a police report the next morning. The officer who took my statement was a middle-aged man who barely looked up from his computer while I explained the situation. He told me identity theft happens all the time and that I should monitor my credit report and freeze my accounts. He made it sound so routine, like I had reported a stolen bike instead of someone potentially ruining my financial future. 2 days later, I got another call from a completely different bank. This time, it was a man from Heritage Credit Union asking why I hadn't completed the loan verification process. I felt sick to my stomach. I explained that I never applied for a loan and that someone was using my identity fraudulently. The representative sounded skeptical, like he thought I was trying to back out of a legitimate application. He started listing details to verify my identity, and that's when my blood went cold. He mentioned my degree type, Bachelor of Arts in Communications, my exact graduation date, and my parents' home address in Ohio as the collateral property. How would identity thieves know my parents' address? How would they know I just graduated and what degree I received? I felt panic rising in my chest. I called my parents immediately to warn them that someone might be targeting our family. My mother answered on the 4th ring, and her voice sounded nervous in a way I couldn't quite place. "Oh, that's strange," she said, but she didn't sound surprised. She sounded caught. I asked her if anyone had contacted them about loans or credit applications, and she said no very quickly, too quickly. Then my father got on the phone. His voice was sharp and hostile. "Why are you bothering us with this nonsense, Harper? Handle your own problems. We're busy." I was stunned. I was calling to warn them about potential fraud, and he was treating me like I was being a nuisance. I tried to explain that this was serious, that someone had used my information and their address, but he cut me off. "Figure it out yourself. You're an adult now." Then, he hung up on me for the second time in 2 weeks. I sat on my apartment floor, staring at my phone, trying to understand why my father was so angry at me for literally nothing. The third call came 5 days later from a credit card company. They wanted to verify my application for a $50,000 credit limit card. $50,000. I felt like I was going to throw up. The representative explained that the application included a scanned copy of my college diploma as proof of education and earning potential, but here's the thing that made everything click into place. I hadn't received my physical diploma yet. The university mailed them out 6 weeks after graduation, and it had only been 3 weeks. The only people who had details about my diploma, including the exact wording and my degree specifications, were the university registrar and whoever had called to request that information. I hung up and immediately called the University of Massachusetts Registrar's office. I asked if anyone had requested information about my diploma or degree verification recently. The woman who answered checked my records and confirmed that yes, someone had called the previous week asking for official verification of my degree for loan purposes. My hands were shaking as I asked who had called. She told me it was my mother. My own mother had called my university, pretending she needed degree verification for a legitimate reason, and had used that information to apply for loans in my name. I couldn't breathe. I sat down on my kitchen floor and tried to process what this meant. My parents hadn't missed my graduation because of a work emergency. They had missed my graduation because they were busy stealing my identity. They were meeting with loan officers and submitting applications while I walked across that stage alone. Every detail suddenly made horrible sense. The way my mother had asked so many specific questions about my diploma mailing timeline. The way my father got defensive and angry when I called about the fraud. They knew. They had known all along because they were the ones doing it. I called my mother's cell phone with my heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. She answered on the second ring with a cautious hello. Like she knew exactly why I was calling. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I asked her directly if she had called my university to get information about my diploma. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and then I heard her take a shaky breath. "Harper, sweetie, I can explain," she started, and those 4 words confirmed everything. My mother confessed, but not in the way someone confesses when they feel guilty. She confessed in the way someone does when they're caught and trying to minimize the damage. She told me that she and my father were in serious financial trouble. His carpentry business had been failing for 2 years, and they had racked up about $60,000 in debt from trying to keep it afloat. They were facing foreclosure on their house. The bank had given them 90 days to come up with a significant payment or they'd lose everything. She said they were desperate and didn't know what else to do. Then she said the thing that made my blood boil. "Harper, we raised you. We fed you and clothed you and drove you to school every single day for 18 years. You owe us this help." What kind of daughter abandons her parents when they're losing everything? I was so shocked I couldn't even form words. She was trying to make me feel guilty for being the victim of their fraud. She was trying to frame their crime as me being selfish for not voluntarily destroying my credit to save them. I asked her how much money they had borrowed in my name. She got quiet again, and then she said she wasn't sure of the exact amount. That answer told me everything. If she wasn't sure, it meant there were multiple loans, multiple accounts, multiple acts of fraud. I asked her again, my voice rising. She said maybe $30,000, maybe a little more, but they were going to pay it all back, so I didn't need to worry. I started laughing, not because anything was funny, but because the absurdity of it all was too much to handle. They stole my identity, opened accounts in my name without permission, ruined my credit, and now they were telling me not to worry because they'd pay it back with money they clearly didn't have. My father grabbed the phone from my mother. I could hear them struggling for a moment before his voice came through loud and aggressive. "You think you're better than us now with your fancy college degree," he shouted. "That degree wouldn't exist without us. We made you who you are. So yeah, we took out a few loans in your name. So what? You'll be fine. Your credit's good." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. This man, who was supposed to protect me, was justifying committing fraud against his own daughter. I asked him the question that had been burning in my mind since I figured this out. "You skipped my graduation to do this, didn't you? You were applying for loans during my ceremony." The silence on the other end told me I was right. My mother finally spoke, her voice small and ashamed. She admitted that they had spent that entire Sunday meeting with loan officers in Ohio, using my degree information and diploma details as proof of what she called family investment worthiness. They had planned this for months. All those phone calls asking about my graduation plans weren't because they cared about celebrating with me. They were gathering information to commit fraud. I told them they needed to stop immediately and reverse all the loans. My father actually laughed at me. Too late, Harper. The money's already spent. It's gone. What do you want us to do? Pull it out of thin air? You want us to be homeless? You want your mother living on the street? He was trying to manipulate me, trying to make me feel responsible for consequences they created. I told them I was going to report this to the police and the banks. My mother started crying, begging me not to ruin their lives. My father called me selfish, ungrateful, and a few other choice words I won't repeat here. I hung up on them this time. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my phone twice trying to set it down. I sat on my couch and cried harder than I had cried at graduation. But this time, I wasn't crying from sadness or loneliness. I was crying from betrayal so deep it felt like my chest was caving in. These were the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. These were the people I had trusted my entire life. And they had used the proudest achievement of my life as a tool to destroy my financial future. The next morning, I requested my full credit report from all 3 major bureaus. What I saw made me physically ill. There were 7 new accounts opened in my name over the past 3 weeks. 7. The total fraudulent debt was $73,000. My credit score, which I had worked so carefully to build during college by paying off a small secured credit card every month, had dropped from 720 to 580. In less than a month, my parents had destroyed years of careful financial planning. I went through each account with a sick feeling in my stomach. There was a personal loan from Midwest Financial Solutions for $35,000. 3 different credit cards from banks I had never heard of, all maxed out to their limits, totaling $28,000. And a car loan for $10,000 from a dealership in Ohio, which meant my parents had bought themselves a used truck using my credit. Every single account listed me as the primary borrower, with my parents as either co-signers or emergency contacts. They had structured it perfectly to look like I had willingly taken out these loans with their assistance. I called every bank and credit card company to dispute the accounts. Each conversation was more frustrating than the last. They all told me the same thing. I needed to file a police report specifically stating that these accounts were opened fraudulently. I needed to provide documentation proving I didn't authorize these applications. And here's where it got complicated. To get justice, to clear my name and my credit, I had to officially report my own parents to the police for identity theft and fraud. It wasn't enough to say someone stole my identity. I had to name them. I was torn apart inside. Part of me, the part that still remembered my mother reading me bedtime stories and my father teaching me to ride a bike, didn't want them to go to jail, but the rational part of me knew that if I didn't take action, they would continue destroying my life. Every day I waited was another day they could open more accounts. I felt paralyzed by the decision. I called my older brother Garrett, who I hadn't spoken to in almost 2 years. We had drifted apart after he moved to Oregon, and our relationship had always been strained because of our parents. When I explained what happened, he wasn't surprised at all. "Harper, they tried the same thing with me 5 years ago," he said quietly. I felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. He explained that our parents had attempted to use his military benefits to take out loans when he was deployed overseas. He caught it early because his commanding officer noticed some irregularities in his financial records during a routine security check. Garrett had threatened to report them to military authorities and they backed off, but they made his life hell for months afterward, calling him ungrateful and telling the whole family he had abandoned them. I asked him why he never warned me. His voice cracked when he answered. "I thought I scared them enough that they'd never try it again. I thought they learned their lesson." "I'm so sorry, Harper. I should have told you. I should have protected you." We both cried on the phone. I wasn't angry at him. I was angry at our parents for being such terrible people that their own children had to warn each other about them. The consequences of their fraud started piling up fast. My job required a background check for a promotion I was being considered for, and when the results came back showing my destroyed credit score, my boss pulled me aside. She was concerned about what she called financial responsibility issues. I was humiliated having to explain that my own parents had committed identity theft against me. She was sympathetic, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. How could she trust me with more responsibility when my personal life was this messy? Then my landlord informed me that my lease renewal application had been denied because of my credit score. I had 60 days to find a new apartment in one of the most expensive rental markets in the country. I spent every evening after work searching for places I could afford, but everywhere I applied rejected me because of my credit. I was facing potential homelessness because of what my parents did. My mental health completely deteriorated. I couldn't sleep more than 3 or 4 hours a night. I had panic attacks at my desk at work. I cried in bathroom stalls during my lunch breaks. I felt like I was drowning and no one could help me. I finally confided in my best friend Isabel about everything that was happening. She was horrified and immediately connected me with a friend of hers who was a lawyer. His name was Jonas Pritchard, and he specialized in fraud cases. He offered me a free initial consultation, which was good because I couldn't afford to pay for legal help. Jonas was in his mid-40s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. He listened to my entire story without interrupting, taking careful notes. When I finished, he looked at me seriously and said, "Harper, this is textbook identity theft and fraud. What your parents did is a federal crime. You need to file a comprehensive police report naming them specifically, and you need to get a restraining order to prevent them from opening any more accounts." I felt my stomach drop. Hearing a lawyer say it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Jonas warned me that every day I waited was another opportunity for my parents to cause more damage. He said people who commit this kind of fraud don't stop voluntarily. They keep going until they're forced to stop. I filed the police report 2 days later. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely sign my name on the statement. I had to write out in detail every fraudulent account, every lie my parents had told, every conversation where they admitted what they did. I had to officially accuse my own mother and father of committing crimes against me. The detective assigned to my case was a woman named Detective Alvarez. She was sympathetic but firm. She told me that family fraud is actually the most common type of identity theft and often the most damaging because victims hesitate to report it. She said I was doing the right thing. The investigation officially began, but in the meantime, my life got worse before it got better. My mother started calling me repeatedly, leaving voicemails that escalated from apologetic to angry to threatening. The first voicemail was her crying, begging me to forgive her, saying she was so sorry and they would fix everything. The second voicemail, just 6 hours later, was completely different. She was screaming about how I called the police on my own parents. "What kind of monster are you?" she yelled into the phone. "We gave you life, and this is how you repay us." The third voicemail came the next day from my father. His voice was cold and threatening. "You're going to regret this, Harper. We know people. Well, make sure everyone knows what a terrible daughter you are. You'll never be able to show your face in this family again." I saved all the voicemails as evidence and blocked both their numbers. But the harassment didn't stop there. 2 days after I filed the police report, my cousin Bethany called me. She was my mother's niece, and we had never been particularly close. She launched into me immediately, calling me cruel and heartless. "How dare you report your own parents to the police?" she screamed. "They're struggling and you're making it worse. Family is supposed to help each other, not destroy each other." I tried to explain that they had stolen my identity and ruined my credit, but she wouldn't listen. She said I was lying to make myself look like the victim. Over the next week, I received hateful messages on social media from relatives I barely knew. My Uncle Frank, who I hadn't spoken to in probably 5 years, sent me a long email about how children these days don't know how to respect their parents and honor their sacrifices. He quoted Bible verses at me about honoring thy father and mother. He said I was going to hell for what I was doing to my family. I received Facebook messages from second cousins telling me I was disgusting. Someone created a fake Instagram account just to send me anonymous threats. I realized what was happening. My parents had gotten to the extended family first and told them their version of the story. They were painting themselves as desperate, struggling parents who asked their successful daughter for help, and I was the selfish monster who not only refused but also called the cops on them. They were playing the victim so convincingly that people who barely knew any of us were sending me death threats. Only my brother Garrett and Isabel believed my side of the story. Everyone else had already made up their minds that I was the villain. I received an anonymous message through Facebook that said, "Your parents are telling everyone you stole from them. People are watching you. You better watch your back." I was genuinely frightened. I didn't know if these were empty threats or if someone might actually try to hurt me. I started looking over my shoulder when I walked to my car. I changed my route to work. I felt paranoid and unsafe in a way I had never experienced before. My parents weren't just destroying my finances, they were destroying my reputation and my sense of security. 1 week after I filed the police report, I received notification from yet another bank about a fraud alert on my account. My heart sank. I thought I had frozen my credit and put alerts on everything, but somehow my parents had found another way. This time they had opened a business account in my name, listing me as the owner of an LLC called Harper Consulting. They had used my full name and my degree as proof that I was a legitimate consultant who needed business financing. The business loan was for $25,000, and according to the bank records, the money had already been withdrawn and spent. My lawyer Jonas was furious when I told him. He said this proved that my parents weren't just stealing from me out of desperation, they were systematically framing me as a willing participant. By creating a business in my name and taking out a business loan, they were making it look like I had consented to all of this and was running some kind of consulting operation. The bank had documentation that included my forged signature on business formation papers. The signature looked close enough to mine that I understood how the bank had been fooled, but it wasn't quite right. Jonas said we would need a handwriting expert to prove the signature was forged, and that would cost about $3,000 that I absolutely did not have. He agreed to continue working on my case pro bono, but the expenses were adding up and I had no way to pay for them. In desperation, I created a GoFundMe page to help cover legal costs. I was terrified to share my story publicly because I knew my parents would see it and retaliate, but I was running out of options. I wrote a careful description of what had happened, leaving out names but explaining that family members had stolen my identity and I needed help paying for the legal battle to clear my name. I shared it on my personal Facebook page and asked friends to share it if they felt comfortable. Within hours, my father had found the GoFundMe. He created multiple fake social media accounts and started posting in the comments section of my fundraiser. The comments said things like, "This girl is lying about her loving parents. We supported her through college and this is how she repays us. And she promised to help us, and now she's playing the victim to scam people out of money." He posted old photos of me as a child, pictures of family vacations and birthday parties, as proof that they had been good parents and I was the liar. Several people who had donated requested refunds after seeing my father's comments. The GoFundMe platform investigated my campaign because someone reported it as fraudulent. I had to provide documentation to prove I was telling the truth, which was humiliating and exhausting. The online harassment got so bad that I had to make all my social media accounts private. But the damage was done. People at my work had seen the drama online. Colleagues started treating me differently, either with pity or suspicion. My boss called me into her office and suggested I take a leave of absence because my personal situation was creating problems in the workplace. She didn't say I was fired, but the implication was clear. If I didn't step away voluntarily, they would find a reason to let me go. I was on the verge of losing my job on top of everything else. Meanwhile, creditors were calling me constantly, threatening legal action for the unpaid loans. I explained over and over that these were fraudulent accounts, but some collection agencies didn't care. One particularly aggressive agency threatened to garnish my wages if I didn't start making payments. I couldn't afford my apartment anymore. I had to move in with Isabel temporarily, sleeping on her couch and keeping most of my belongings in a storage unit I could barely afford. I felt like I had lost everything. My credit, my apartment, nearly my job, my family relationships, and my sense of safety. All because my parents decided their financial problems were more important than my entire future. One evening, sitting on Isabel's couch at my absolute lowest point, I received a letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a cease and desist letter from my parents' attorney. They were threatening to sue me for defamation and harassment. They claimed I had damaged their reputation by making false accusations, and that my police report and social media posts constituted harassment. The audacity of it took my breath away. They had committed crimes against me, and now they were threatening to sue me for reporting those crimes. That cease and desist letter did something unexpected. Instead of scaring me into silence, it made me angry. Really, truly angry for the first time since this whole nightmare began. I sat on Isabel's couch holding that letter, and something inside me snapped. I didn't survive 4 years of college, working 2 jobs, sacrificing sleep and social life and any semblance of normal young adulthood, just to let my parents destroy everything I built. They wanted me to be scared and quiet and compliant. I decided right then that I was done being their victim. The next morning, I went to Detective Alvarez's office with every single document I had collected. Bank statements, credit reports, recorded voicemails, screenshots of threatening messages, the cease and desist letter, everything. I laid it all out on her desk and told her I wanted to move forward with prosecution no matter what it took. She looked at me with something like respect and said that was exactly the attitude I needed. Detective Alvarez had news for me. The investigation had uncovered even more fraud that I didn't know about. My parents had attempted to refinance my student loans without my knowledge. The attempt failed because the loan company required me to be physically present to sign paperwork, but the fact that they tried showed how far they were willing to go. They had also called my employer pretending to be me, trying to verify my salary information for additional loan applications. The HR department had flagged it as suspicious and refused to provide information, but my parents had tried anyway. The detective explained that what I was dealing with wasn't desperate parents making bad decisions in a moment of panic. This was premeditated, systematic, calculated theft. They had been planning this for months, gathering information, timing their applications, and covering their tracks. The pattern showed clear intent and sophistication. Based on the evidence, the district attorney's office was moving forward with formal criminal charges, including multiple counts of identity theft, fraud, and forgery. I started seeing a therapist named Regina, who specialized in family trauma. She was in her early 50s with a calm, steady presence that made me feel safe for the first time in weeks. Regina helped me understand something crucial. She said, "Harper, you didn't cause this situation and you're not responsible for the consequences your parents face. Their choices led them here, not yours. You are allowed to protect yourself even when that protection hurts people you love." That concept was revolutionary to me. I had been raised to believe that family loyalty meant accepting any treatment, no matter how harmful. My brother Garrett flew in from Oregon to support me. We hadn't seen each other in person in 3 years, and when he got off the plane and hugged me, I cried in the airport arrivals terminal. He stayed with Isabel and me for a week, and during that time, we talked more honestly than we ever had growing up. He shared details about his own experience with our parents' fraud attempt that he hadn't told me over the phone. When he was deployed in Afghanistan, our parents had tried to use his military benefits to take out loans by forging his signature on power of attorney documents. A military financial officer caught the irregularities during a routine security check, or Garrett would have come home to destroyed credit just like I had. Garrett was furious when he learned the full extent of what our parents had done to me. He called them from Isabel's apartment and told them directly that he would testify against them in court if necessary. I heard my father screaming through the phone from across the room. My mother was crying in the background. Garrett stayed calm and firm. He told them they had one chance to make this right by confessing everything and cooperating with authorities, or he would personally make sure they faced the maximum possible sentence. They hung up on him. During his visit, Garrett helped me find an unexpected ally. He remembered that our parents had a former business partner named Dwight, who had a falling out with our father about 5 years ago. Garrett tracked down Dwight's contact information and reached out to him. Dwight agreed to meet with us at a coffee shop in Cambridge. He was in his early 60s, with tired eyes and a wary expression that softened when we explained why we wanted to talk to him. Dwight told us a story that made everything make more sense. He and my father had been business partners in the carpentry company for 3 years. Dwight had invested $40,000 of his own money to help expand the business. When things started going wrong financially, he discovered that my father had been diverting company funds for personal use and hiding the financial problems from him. When Dwight confronted him, my father denied everything. Then my mother got involved, crying and begging Dwight not to sue them, saying they had children to feed and would pay him back. Dwight, feeling guilty and sorry for them, agreed to walk away without taking legal action. He never saw a penny of his $40,000. Dwight said he would testify about their pattern of financial manipulation if it would help my case. I was overwhelmed by his generosity toward a stranger. He smiled sadly and said, "You're not a stranger, Harper. You're another one of their victims. I should have reported them back then. Maybe if I had, you wouldn't be going through this now." Through Dwight, I connected with 2 other people my parents had defrauded over the years. One was a former employee who they had shorted on wages, and another was a contractor they had hired and never paid. We formed an informal support group, all of us bonded by the experience of being financially betrayed by Leonard and Maureen. My lawyer, Jonas, filed a civil lawsuit against my parents for damages. The lawsuit included compensation for credit repair costs, legal fees, lost wages from the time I missed work, and emotional distress. The total amount came to $150,000. I knew my parents couldn't pay that much money. They didn't have it. But Jonas said the point wasn't to actually collect the full amount. The point was to have a legal judgment on record that would prevent them from ever claiming they were innocent or that this was all a misunderstanding. I updated my GoFundMe with scanned copies of the police reports and court filings that proved I was telling the truth. I included a statement from my lawyer verifying that I was the victim of identity theft by family members. The response was overwhelming. Donations started coming in again, this time with messages of support and encouragement. People shared their own stories of family financial abuse. Within 2 weeks, I had raised $12,000, enough to cover the handwriting expert and other legal expenses. The comments section filled with people apologizing for doubting me and expressing outrage at what my parents had done. A local news reporter somehow found my story and reached out asking for an interview. I was terrified of more publicity, but Jonas thought it was a good idea. He said public attention would make it harder for my parents to paint themselves as victims. We arranged for an interview where they filmed me in shadow with my voice digitally altered to protect my identity. The story aired on the Boston Evening News with the headline, "Local Graduates, Parents Accused of Stealing Identity Using College Diploma." The news piece went semi-viral in Massachusetts. I received hundreds of messages from strangers offering support, legal advice, and sharing similar stories. The police arrested my parents at their home in Ohio on a Wednesday morning in early September. Someone's doorbell camera across the street captured the whole thing, and the video ended up online, though I never found out who posted it. I watched the video once with a sick feeling in my stomach. My mother was screaming about her ungrateful daughter while officers tried to calmly place her in handcuffs. My father was yelling threats in my direction, saying he would make me pay for this, that I was destroying my family. The neighbors came out to watch. It was humiliating for everyone involved, but I had to remind myself that they chose this path. Extended family members, who had been silent during my harassment, suddenly had opinions again. Some of them were horrified and apologized to me, including Uncle Frank, who sent a short, awkward email saying he had been wrong to judge me without knowing the full story. But my cousin Bethany doubled down, posting on Facebook about how police brutality and overzealous prosecution were ruining innocent people's lives. She blocked me on all social media, rather than admit she had been wrong. Most of my relatives just went silent, too embarrassed to acknowledge what had happened. Public opinion shifted dramatically once people saw the arrest and the news coverage. The court filings became public record, and local news outlets reported on the details. It was impossible to deny the facts once they were laid out in legal documents. My parents were released on $20,000 bail, which my mother's sister paid. I later learned my aunt took out a loan to cover it, which made me sad for her. She was a kind woman who got dragged into this mess through no fault of her own. 2 days after their release, my parents violated the restraining order by sending me threatening text messages from a burner phone. The messages said things like, "You'll never be safe from us," and, "Well, make sure you regret what you've done to this family." I reported it immediately to Detective Alvarez. The judge revoked their bail and they were taken back into custody. This time there was no bail option. They would remain in county jail until the trial. I felt conflicted about everything. Part of me felt relief knowing they couldn't hurt me anymore, but another part felt this deep, aching sadness. These were my parents. I had memories of my father teaching me to tie my shoes and my mother baking cookies for school events. How had we gotten from there to here? My therapist Regina reminded me that the parents I remembered from childhood were either a facade or they had changed dramatically. Either way, the people who stole my identity were not the same people who once loved me unconditionally, if they ever had. My parents' defense attorney reached out to Jonas with a plea deal offer. They wanted to plead guilty to reduce charges in exchange for probation instead of prison time. The deal included mandatory restitution payments, community service, and a public apology. They would have to pay back every dollar they stole, though it would take years. In exchange, they would avoid felony convictions and prison sentences. Jonas presented the offer to me neutrally, saying it was my decision whether to accept. I struggled with the choice for days. My brother Garrett was firmly against the plea deal. He argued that our parents needed to face real consequences or they would never change. He said they had gotten away with too much for too long, but accepting a plea deal would guarantee some form of justice and restitution. Going to trial was risky. Juries are unpredictable, and there was a chance my parents could be acquitted if their lawyer presented them sympathetically enough. I met with the other fraud victims, Dwight and the others, to get their perspectives. They all said the same thing. Our parents had a decades-long pattern of exploiting people and playing the victim. They had never faced serious consequences, so they never stopped. Dwight looked me in the eye and said, "Harper, if you let them off easy, they'll do this to someone else. Maybe not right away, but eventually. People like this don't change unless they're forced to." I made my decision. I rejected the plea deal. I told Jonas I wanted to go to trial. I wanted a public record of what my parents had done. I wanted a jury to hear the evidence and make a judgment. I wanted accountability, not just for myself but for every person my parents had hurt over the years. The trial date was set for 3 months later, in December. In the meantime, the credit bureaus finally flagged all the fraudulent accounts. With the police reports and court documents, I was able to dispute every single account. The process was slow and frustrating, involving dozens of phone calls and certified letters, but gradually my credit reports started to clear. My score began climbing back up. The collection agencies backed off once they saw the legal documentation. It felt like I was finally reclaiming my life piece by piece. My employer allowed me to return to work full-time. My boss apologized for how she had handled the situation earlier, admitting she should have been more supportive. I appreciated the apology even though the damage had already been done to my professional reputation at that company. I started looking for new job opportunities at places where I could have a fresh start. I found a new apartment, nothing fancy, but it was mine. A small studio in Somerville with old hardwood floors and a window that looked out onto a tree-lined street. I moved my belongings out of storage and slowly created a space that felt safe. Isabel helped me paint the walls a warm gray color. My brother sent me a housewarming gift, a framed photo of the two of us from when we were kids, smiling and happy before everything got complicated. The trial loomed over everything. My parents continued to send letters from jail that my lawyer intercepted. I never read them. Jonas told me they alternated between threatening me and trying to manipulate me emotionally. One letter from my mother apparently said, "I'm your mother. I gave you life. How can you do this to me?" Another from my father said, "You'll never be free of us. We're your blood. This will haunt you forever." Jonas destroyed the letters after documenting them as evidence of continued harassment. I focused on healing and preparing my victim impact statement for the trial. I wrote draft after draft, trying to find the words to express what they had taken from me. It wasn't just money or credit. They had stolen my graduation day. They had stolen my ability to trust. They had stolen years of my life that I would spend rebuilding and recovering. They had stolen my family. I wanted the jury to understand the full scope of the devastation. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in December. The courthouse was an imposing granite building in downtown Boston, and I felt small walking up the steps with Jonas beside me. My brother Garrett flew in again for the trial. Isabel took time off work to sit in the courtroom with me. Their presence gave me the strength to walk through those heavy doors. The trial lasted 5 days. The prosecutor was a sharp woman in her mid-30s who presented the evidence methodically and devastatingly. She showed the jury bank records, forged documents, and recordings of phone calls where my parents admitted to the fraud. She brought in handwriting experts who testified that the signatures on loan applications were forgeries. She presented testimony from the university registrar, who confirmed my mother had called, asking for my diploma information under false pretenses. She brought in Dwight and the other fraud victims to establish a pattern of financial manipulation going back years. The defense attorney tried to paint my parents as desperate people who made mistakes out of fear of losing their home. He showed photos of their house with a foreclosure notice taped to the door. He had my mother testify, crying on the stand about how scared she was and how she never meant to hurt me. She said they always planned to pay everything back, that they thought of it as borrowing from family, not stealing. My father didn't testify, which Jonas said was smart of their lawyer because my father's hostile personality would have alienated the jury. On the fourth day of the trial, I took the stand. My hands were shaking as I was sworn in, but once I started speaking, a strange calm came over me. I told my story from beginning to end. I described standing alone at my graduation while my parents applied for loans in my name. I described the phone calls where they showed no remorse. I described losing my apartment, nearly losing my job, and the months of harassment and threats. I read my victim impact statement to the jury. They didn't just steal money from me, I said, looking at the 12 people who held my parents' fate in their hands. They stole my graduation joy, the moment I had worked 4 years to reach. They stole my trust in family and my sense of safety in the world. They stole my ability to start my adult life on stable ground. They stole my credit, my reputation, and years of my future that I'll spend repairing the damage they caused. And when I tried to stop them, they stole my family by turning everyone against me. What they did wasn't a mistake born of desperation. It was calculated, premeditated, and cruel. I cried while reading my statement, but I stayed composed. I wanted the jury to see me as a real person, not just a case number. When the defense attorney cross-examined me, he tried to make me seem vindictive or exaggerating, but I stayed calm and truthful. I had the evidence on my side. The jury could see that. The prosecution rested their case on the afternoon of the fourth day. The defense put on a brief case that mostly consisted of character witnesses saying, "My parents were good people who made bad choices." It wasn't compelling compared to the mountain of evidence against them. Closing arguments happened on the fifth day. The jury went out to deliberate at 2 in the afternoon. By 6 that evening, they had reached a verdict. We all filed back into the courtroom. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The judge asked the jury foreman if they had reached a verdict. He said they had. Guilty on all counts. 7 counts of identity theft, 4 counts of fraud, 3 counts of forgery. Guilty on every single charge. I felt my knees go weak. Garrett grabbed my hand and squeezed it. Isabel was crying behind me. Jonas nodded with satisfaction. My parents showed no remorse during the verdict. My father looked angry, glaring at me like this was somehow my fault. My mother was crying, but they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of self-pity. The judge set a sentencing hearing for 2 weeks later. We left the courthouse, and I felt like I could finally breathe for the first time in months. The sentencing hearing was brief, but powerful. The judge was a stern woman in her early 60s who had clearly seen too many cases like mine. She addressed my parents directly before announcing their sentences. "This court sees many crimes," she said, "but few as cruel as parents exploiting their own child. You betrayed the trust of someone who should have been able to depend on you unconditionally. You showed no remorse and continued to harass and threaten your daughter even after being arrested. This court finds your conduct reprehensible." She sentenced my mother Maureen to 3 years in prison, 5 years probation after release, and ordered her to pay $73,000 in restitution to me. She sentenced my father Leonard to 4 years in prison because of the additional harassment and threats, 5 years probation, and the same restitution amount. They were also ordered to pay my legal fees and credit repair costs. The judge made it clear that the restitution would be enforced through wage garnishment for the rest of their lives if necessary. My parents were removed from the courtroom, both of them yelling. My mother's last words to me were, "I hope you're happy destroying your family." My father just glared at me with pure hatred in his eyes. I felt nothing watching them being led away. No satisfaction, no sadness, just emptiness and exhaustion. Jonas shook my hand and told me I had been incredibly brave. Garrett hugged me and told me he was proud of me. But I didn't feel brave. I just felt tired. 6 months after the sentencing, my life looked completely different. My credit score had climbed back up to 650, which wasn't perfect, but was a massive improvement from where it had been. The fraudulent accounts were all marked as such on my credit report, with notes explaining they were the result of identity theft. I had received about $15,000 in restitution payments so far, with more coming as the state garnished my parents' wages from their prison jobs. It would take years to receive the full amount they owed me, but at least it was something. I got promoted at work to a position I had been working toward before everything fell apart. The salary bump to $58,000 a year made a real difference in my ability to save money and rebuild my financial life. I moved into a nicer apartment in Cambridge, still modest but in a safer neighborhood with better light. I adopted a cat from the local shelter, a scruffy orange tabby I named Finnegan who kept me company on lonely evenings. I continued therapy with Regina every week, working through the complex trauma of family betrayal. It wasn't a straight path to healing. Some days I felt strong and independent. Other days I felt overwhelming sadness for the family I never had and would never have. Regina helped me understand that both feelings could be true at the same time. I could grieve the loss of my parents, while also knowing that cutting them out of my life was the healthiest choice I could make. My relationship with my brother Garrett became one of the most important in my life. We talked on the phone every week and visited each other every few months. He met Finnegan during one visit and they bonded immediately, which I joked meant my cat had good judgment about people. Garrett and I talked about building the family we wanted rather than mourning the one we were born into. We decided that meant being there for each other consistently and honestly, something our parents never did for us. I went on my first real date in over a year with a man named Elliot, who I met through a friend of Isabel's. He was 26, worked as a software engineer, and had kind eyes and a gentle sense of humor. On our second date, I told him the basic outline of what had happened with my parents. I needed to be honest about my situation because it was such a huge part of my life. Elliot listened without judgment and then said, "That must have been incredibly difficult. I'm glad you're on the other side of it now." He didn't treat me like I was damaged or make it weird. We started dating seriously, taking things slow while I continued healing. Isabel got married that spring, and she asked me to be her maid of honor. Standing up at her wedding, watching her marry someone who genuinely loved her, made me emotional in ways I didn't expect. It gave me hope that healthy love existed, that not everyone would betray me the way my parents had. Her baby was born 8 months later, and when she asked me to be the godmother, I cried happy tears. I was building a chosen family of people who actually cared about me. I started a blog about financial fraud and family abuse, sharing my story anonymously and creating resources for other victims. The blog got moderate attention, and I started receiving messages from people in similar situations asking for advice. I connected them with lawyers and support groups. I shared what I had learned about disputing fraudulent accounts and protecting your credit. Turning my pain into something that could help others gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't expected. I realized my parents had tried to use my degree to destroy me, but instead I was using my voice and my education to help others. I began speaking at local community colleges about identity theft prevention, sharing my story in broad strokes without revealing identifying details. Young people were shocked to learn that family members were often the perpetrators of identity theft. I taught them how to protect their information, check their credit reports, and recognize red flags. The work felt meaningful. It felt like I was taking something horrible and creating something good from it. On the first anniversary of my graduation, I thought about that day sitting alone outside the ceremony hall with my parents' empty seats mocking me. I thought about how devastated I had felt, how alone and abandoned. Now, a year later, I understood that their absence had been a blessing in disguise. I had graduated alone, but I was already free. I just hadn't known it yet. I bought a new frame for my diploma, the one I eventually received after a legal battle to get it back from my parents who had been using it as their fraud prop. I hung it on the wall of my apartment next to a photo from Isabel's wedding where the three of us, me, Garrett, and Isabel, were laughing together. That photo represented my real family. The people I chose, the people who chose me back. My parents sent letters from prison occasionally, always intercepted by my lawyer. I never read them. I didn't need their apologies or their excuses. I didn't need closure from them because I was creating my own closure. I was 23 years old with my whole life ahead of me. I was stronger than I ever thought I could be. I was wiser about trust and boundaries. I was healing at my own pace without anyone telling me I should forgive or forget. One evening, I sat on my apartment floor with Finnegan purring in my lap, and I realized something profound. Some people are born into families that love and support them unconditionally. Other people have to build their own families from friendships and chosen relationships. I had learned the hard way which category I fell into, but I had learned, and that education, the one that taught me about resilience and boundaries and self-worth, was worth more than any college degree. I texted my brother that night. "I'm okay. Better than okay. I'm free." He responded immediately. "Proud of you, sis. Always." I smiled at my phone and scratched Finnegan behind his ears. I was going to be all right. More than all right. I was going to build a life so good, so full of people who genuinely loved me, that my parents' betrayal would eventually just be a chapter in my story, not the whole book. So, what about you? Have you ever dealt with family members who violated your trust or took advantage of you financially? How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments because I know I'm not alone in this experience, and maybe sharing our stories helps us all heal a little. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel because I share real stories about real struggles and how people overcome them. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it, someone who's dealing with family drama or financial abuse and feels alone. And remember, family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who shows up for you when everything falls apart. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I hope wherever you are in your own journey, you find the strength to protect yourself and build the life you deserve. Take care of yourselves out there, and I'll see you in the next one.